Now let's look at the US. You're never too far away from an election or a midterm election somewhere in the world, even a prime ministerial reshuffle as we just saw in Britain. But in the US, we're looking to the midterms. The election is this November and it shapes the second half of Joe Biden's term and his presidency. Many contests will be shaped by political fissures in both major parties and the lingering shadow of the former President Donald Trump. Joining me live now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Fellow at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, Mick Mulvaney. Great to see you once again. Inflation and the economy, like in Australia, is front and centre in the United States. It's interesting to see how Joe Biden is starting to message this. How is that playing for him? Is that going to be one of the most important issues? And later we'll get to, of course, gun control, which has been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons again.
Yeah, good morning, Laura. He is trying to change the narrative. It's not working very well. We had some new polling data out this morning showing that the approval rating of the president on the issues of the economy and the inflation are in the high 20s. This is a historically low level for any president on any particular issue. So he is trying to change the dialogue in terms of raising issues about gun control. The Supreme Court is getting ready, we think, to hand down a decision on abortion. And of course, the January 6th commission, the inquiry into the riots of January 6th starts Thursday night in prime time here in the United States. So the Democrats, President Biden's team is trying hard to change the narrative, but inflation, as it is in so many places around the world, is driving the narrative politically right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. And since we spoke last week, there's been a number of shootings in the United States, more gun-related crime. Can you just explain to us what happens when you see these big events, like you did in Uvalde? We've seen the strong political reaction. What happens in people's day-to-day lives?
I think it's ordinary to have a very emotional, very visceral emotional reaction to that. People are just stunned that this kind of thing can still happen, that somebody can take a gun and shoot their own grandmother in the face and then go shoot 19 young children. It's hard for people to admit that we live in a country where that is possible. And it does drive political debate. There is ongoing discussion right now on Capitol Hill between Republicans and Democrats, especially on the Senate. Keep in mind, under the way our system works, the House rules by a simple majority where the Democrats now control it. In the Senate, it takes 60 votes to do any particular piece of major legislation, and the Democrats would need Republican support. So most of the bipartisan discussion takes place in the Senate, and that is ongoing right now as to whether or not we're going to try and limit the size of magazines, limit particular types of weapons. We limited and made illegal bump stocks during the Trump administration. There'll be future discussions about that. So those discussions are certainly ongoing, and I think this time may be different. I think this time you might actually see something voted on in both the House and the Senate.
Okay, how might the midterms reshape those numbers?
The midterms will reshape the House. I talked to Kevin McCarthy today, and while some pundits here are suggesting that the Republicans might pick up as many as 70 seats, I think the more reasonable number is probably 30 or 40, and Kevin McCarthy will be the Speaker of the House, replacing Nancy Pelosi. The Senate is much harder to determine this far out. We still haven't finished many of our primary elections, so we don't know who the candidates are. So the Senate is still a 50-50, but regardless, Joe Biden will have to deal with Republicans starting in November of next year.
Yeah, okay, so how's it going at the moment? I mean, even before the midterms, they're looking at trying to get some new gun law reform through. You say 60 votes is required in the Senate. Is it there and are the numbers there to do exactly what when it comes to gun control? Because we saw his address to the nation just last week and he had a whole list of things, but what's he going to be able to get through?
Yeah, and I saw a really good analysis of that speech. I watched that speech, and I thought the analysis was correct, was that he was speaking to the Democrat base and not the nation at large. He's going to have to get Republican votes. I believe there would be 60 votes for some small restrictions on gun rights in this nation, again, regarding the size of of a magazine regarding some background checks. There was tremendous support for background checks when I was in the House, but it didn't pass for a variety of reasons. I think once you start up talking about banning particular types of weapons in this country is where, especially the folks on the right, the Second Amendment groups, really start to get their backs up. So I think you will see some changes to the way we deal with guns in this country. It won't be anything near to what would happen, say, and is happening now in Canada, happened previously in Australia. You'll see some restrictions, but certainly I don't think we'll be looking at banning gun ownership of a particular kind.
I'm not going to ask you whether you think Donald Trump's going to run as president again, because that question's getting quite boring, isn't it? I ask you from time to time. But still, he has a massive influence on candidates in the midterms and will in the lead up to the main game, the election. How is that playing out at the moment? Do you think he's actively working, under the radar?
Well, not under the radar. Donald Trump doesn't work under the radar. Donald Trump is always up front. And the answer is it depends. In fact, I'm here tonight in Charleston, South Carolina, on a campaign for someone that the president has come out against. He's had a great deal of success getting people elected this year. He's had some very high-profile failures. He went after the governor in Georgia, who won easily, despite the president taking a position against him. And I think what you're seeing is in open races, the president has a great deal of influence. With incumbents, especially trusted incumbents, the president has less influence. So while Donald Trump's endorsement is still the gold standard in a Republican primary and in elections in this country, it's not the be-all and end-all. And I think you'll see him continue to win a lot of races, but also lose a few between now and November as well.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I stand corrected. He never does anything under the radar at all. You're absolutely right about that. Before I let you go, do you think Donald Trump has shown that he's changed in many ways, or any way at all? Has he changed his tactics? Is there some nuance you're picking up at all?
No, Donald Trump doesn't do nuance. Donald Trump does 100% in your face all the time. I've not seen a lot of change. I think certainly if there's anything seriously to answer your question, I think he's surrounded himself with a very different level of advisor. And I think you'll see a lower quality product out of the president. At the beginning of his administration, he was advised by the former CEO of Exxon and the former president of Goldman Sachs. Now he's advised by a guy who sells pillows on television. So it's a very different level of person advising the president of the United States. And I think you see a lower quality output from him until he changes his inner circle. But other than that, Donald Trump is going to continue being Donald Trump because it's all he knows how to do.
Yep, and some of his supporters don't want him to change one bit, so we'll see how that works. Right, Mick Mulvaney, can't wait to talk to you next week. We'll check in soon.
Thanks, Laura.